All right, welcome to your personalized deep dive.
I like that.
You sent us some sources about life's hard truths,
Yeah.
and we're going to unpack it all
We are?
just for you.
Just for you. It's exciting. It's a really clever approach using these frameworks.
I know.
Like you're getting a personalized philosophical guide,
Right.
but instead of dense textbooks,
Yeah.
we've got these really engaging sources to work with. I love it.
I love that. Okay, so this timeline idea,
Right.
it's not like, dates and
No.
specific years, but more about those
Aha moments.
aha moments, exactly.
Yeah.
The realizations that hit you
Stages of life.
at different stages, yeah. And the sources break it down into early life,
Right.
adulthood, and then later life.
Each with its own set of, hard-won truths,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
Okay, so what's cool is that it acknowledges that
Right.
learning and adapting never really stops.
Never stops, right?
You don't just reach wisdom
And you're done.
and call it a day. Yeah.
Exactly. You're always evolving. So
Always evolving, yeah.
even if you're not in that early life stage anymore,
Yeah.
these early truths are still super relevant.
So relevant. Okay, so let's dive into early life.
All right, let's do it.
And the source points out some tough but essential lessons we
Yeah.
learn early on, things like failure and rejection.
Oh, yeah. The big ones, for sure.
Big ones, yeah. And maybe even the biggest one, that the world
Doesn't revolve around us.
does not revolve around us. Shocker.
That one could be a real shocker,
It
right?
can.
You're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
But it's actually crucial for building resilience.
Yeah.
So think about it. Early experiences with failure and rejection,
Okay.
as tough as they are at the time,
Right.
they teach us how to bounce back, how to cope when things don't go our way.
It's like building up those emotional muscles.
It is. You got to work them out. You got to work them out early.
Gotta work them out. So the source specifically mentions learning that not everyone will like you.
Ooh, that's a good one.
That's a big one, especially when you're younger.
Especially, when you're younger and you're still figuring out who you are. It can be,
Yeah.
it's both liberating and a little scary
Right.
to realize that you can't please everyone.
Yeah.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
Once you accept that, it frees you up to, define yourself
Yeah.
on your own terms.
Your own terms, yeah.
You're not based on what others think.
Exactly.
That's where genuine self-confidence comes from.
It's like giving yourself permission to be your authentic self.
Yeah.
Even if it means,
Not fitting in.
not fitting in every mold.
Every mold. Exactly.
Which I wish someone had told me in high school.
I know.
Saved me a lot of angst.
Right. Don't we all?
Right.
All those, if only I knew then what I know now moments.
Totally.
Yeah, but hey, that's part of the journey, right?
That's part of it. All right, so moving on to adulthood.
All right, let's get real.
This is where things get even more real.
Yeah.
The source talks about limitations of time and money,
Yes.
the weight of responsibilities, all the things.
No, all the things.
It's not just about figuring out who you are anymore. It's like juggling work, relationships.
Maybe a family, bills.
Maybe family, bills, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it can feel like you're constantly playing catch up.
Right. And
And the source doesn't sugarcoat it.
no, it doesn't. It says
Straight up says, you will run out of time and money
trying to please
other people.
other people.
And that hit me hard.
It's a stark reminder.
It is.
But here's where that early lesson about the world's not revolving around us
Okay.
comes back into play.
Yeah.
As adults, we have to make conscious choices about where we invest our time and energy.
So it's not about being selfish, but more about setting healthy boundaries.
Exactly. And this source highlights the importance of prioritizing
Yeah.
relationships that truly matter, nurturing those passions,
Right.
and taking care of our own well-being.
Right. Things that bring you genuine fulfillment.
Right. Not just
Not fleeting.
fleeting satisfaction.
Right. Okay, that makes sense then. But
Yeah.
even when you are prioritizing those right things, relationships can be tricky.
They can.
The source mentions relationships evolving and ending,
Right.
which, let's be honest, that can be really tough.
It can.
How does that fit into this, framework of life's hard truths?
I think it speaks to that ongoing process of growth and change that we've been talking about, right?
Right.
We as individuals are constantly evolving,
Yeah.
and so are the people around us. And sometimes those paths diverge,
Yeah.
and that can be painful.
It's like that saying, people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right.
I like that. Yeah.
Sometimes letting go, even when it hurts, can create space
It can.
for healthier connections and personal evolution.
Right. And it's not about placing blame, but just recognizing
Right.
when a relationship has run its course
Run its course, yeah.
and allowing both people to move forward.
So even heartbreak can be a catalyst for growth. That's kind of a mind-blowing concept.
It is. It challenges us to reevaluate our needs and our values and the role relationships play in our lives. So much comes out of that.
So much. Okay, so we're entering later life.
Ooh, later life.
And I'm sensing a theme here. Things are getting a bit heavier.
They are. It's getting real.
Loss, comparison, the need to adjust our dreams, all those things.
Yeah, I could see why this stage might feel intimidating,
Right.
especially if you're not there yet.
Yeah.
But the source doesn't frame it as something to be feared.
Right.
Instead, it emphasizes, like, all the opportunities
Yeah.
for deeper acceptance and self-awareness
Yeah.
and meaning-making
Meaning making.
that come with these challenges. So it's not all doom and gloom.
It's not all doom and gloom, no. It's about recognizing that even amidst loss
Right.
and the need to reevaluate our aspirations,
Yeah,
there's still so much to be grateful for, so much to learn, so much to experience.
there is.
This line from the source really stuck with me. The world won't pause for your pain. At first glance, it sounds kind of harsh.
I can see why you'd say that, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think what it's trying to convey
Yeah.
is that life keeps moving,
Right.
even when we're hurting.
Even when we're hurting, yeah.
And we have a choice. We can either get stuck in our setbacks,
Right.
or we can keep moving forward,
Keep moving forward.
even if it's just like one tiny step at a time.
One tiny step. It's about finding that inner strength
It is.
to keep going when things feel overwhelming.
To keep going, yeah.
Okay, we got the timeline down. Now let's bring in those conceptual characters. I'm so intrigued by this approach.
It's fun, right?
It is fun. The source lists the individual, other people, lost loved ones, and systemic barriers.
Ooh, that's quite a cast.
Quite a cast. Sounds like a really thought-provoking play.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But remember, these aren't characters in the traditional sense.
Right.
They're more like those abstract forces
Yeah.
that shape our experiences, like
Right.
different lenses through which we can view these hard truths.
Okay, so walk us through it. Who are these characters and what roles do they play?
All right, so the individual,
Yeah.
that's essentially you, the listener,
Okay.
on your own unique life journey. It's that part of us that's constantly learning, making choices,
Right.
striving for a fulfilling life.
Makes sense. And then there's other people. I think we can all relate to that.
We can.
Let's face it, people can be the source of both.
Our greatest joys
Our greatest joy
and our biggest headaches.
and our biggest headaches.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So this character represents the entire spectrum
Right.
of relationships, family, friends,
Romantic partners,
colleagues, even stranger.
even strangers you encounter.
Right. And the source emphasizes that these interactions can be supportive,
Right.
challenging, or anything in between.
Anything in between.
And those relationships are always evolving, right?
They are.
Which brings us back to that idea of change being inevitable.
Right, exactly.
Okay, what about lost loved ones? That one feels a bit bittersweet.
Bittersweet, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But the source suggests that this character isn't just about grief and loss.
Okay.
It's also about the legacy of love, the memories that shape us,
Right.
and the lessons we carry with us from those who are no longer physically present.
It's like they become part of our internal compass, even in their absence. I love that.
Me too. And finally, we have systemic barriers.
Okay.
This one's a bit more complex.
Yeah.
The source describes it as those often invisible forces
Right.
that can impact our success and well-being.
Things like inequality and prejudice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Lack of access to resources, yeah.
Yeah. And it's something we don't always talk about openly, but
Right.
it's definitely a factor in everyone's life.
Everyone's like, to some degree at least.
To one degree, yeah.
And acknowledging this character
Okay.
can help us understand why hard work doesn't always equal success.
Right.
And why it's just important to fight for a more just, equitable world.
It's not about making excuses,
Right.
but about recognizing that the playing field isn't always level.
It isn't always level.
Wow. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. We've got our timeline of life stages.
Right.
Our cast of conceptual characters.
We do.
Now let's bring it all together
Do it.
and revisit those 15 hard truths from the source,
Okay.
viewing them through the lens of the timeline and the characters.
I like it. And remember, these truths, they're not meant to be depressing or discouraging.
No.
They're more like signposts,
Okay.
guiding us toward greater resilience and self-awareness.
It's like they're giving us a cheat sheet for navigating the complexities of life.
They are a cheat sheet. I love that.
But it's up to us to decide how to use it.
It is how to use it exactly. So let's pick out a few of these truths and see how they play out
Okay.
in the context of our timeline and characters.
All right.
One that immediately jumps out at me is truth number 11, comparison steals joy.
Ooh, yeah. That's a good one.
This feels especially relevant in the age of social media,
Especially.
when we're constantly bombarded
Right.
with everyone else's highlight reels.
Oh, yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up
So easy.
in comparing ourselves to others, especially online.
I was just thinking that.
Weren't you?
Yeah.
I know. It's like, and who does that connect to in our cast of characters?
Other people.
Other people, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
We're social creatures by nature.
Right.
So it's natural to compare ourselves to others.
Right.
But the source reminds us that this can be a trap,
Yeah.
especially when we're comparing our behind-the-scenes struggles
Yeah.
to someone else's carefully curated online persona.
It's like that saying, don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20.
Oh, I love that.
Right.
I love that.
We all have our own unique journeys, our own timeline
Right.
for success and happiness. And social media often distorts that.
It does.
It does. And focusing on our own growth, celebrating our own small wins, that's where the real joy comes from.
That is.
That is, you know what? Instead of just saying comparison steals joy,
Yeah?
it might be more helpful to think of it as comparison steals energy.
Ooh, I like that.
Because when you're constantly comparing yourself,
Yeah.
you're draining your own energy and focus,
You are.
which is such a valuable thing.
Such a valuable thing. That's
Yeah.
a great way to reframe it.
Yeah.
And it highlights the importance of, like, being mindful of our social media consumption
Right.
and consciously choosing to focus on things that uplift and inspire us
Yes.
rather than things that make us feel inadequate.
It's about curating your own mental feed.
I like that.
It's just like you curate your social media feed.
I like that.
Yeah.
Cure that mental feed.
Mental feed. Okay, how about another truth? One that really resonated with me was number 9. Hard work doesn't equal guaranteed success. It's a tough pill to swallow.
It is.
Especially if you were raised with that pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality,
Right.
which a lot of us have internalized.
We have, yeah.
It can make you feel like if you're not succeeding,
Right.
it's because you're not working hard enough.
And that's not always the case.
That's not always the case. So
Yeah.
this truth connects directly to systemic barriers.
It does.
That character we talked about.
Yeah.
It acknowledges that, like, while effort is essential,
Right.
there are often external factors at play
Right.
that can influence our outcomes.
Things like, yeah,
Things like socioeconomic background,
access to education, discrimination,
discrimination, even just plain luck,
even just plain luck, yeah.
which is crazy.
It is. It's a big factor.
It's a huge factor. So it's not about saying that hard work doesn't matter.
No, of course not.
It's more about, like, there's a bigger picture to consider.
Exactly.
And sometimes that bigger picture isn't fair.
It's not. No, it's not.
It's like you're running a race where some people start a mile ahead.
That's a great analogy.
That's true.
Yeah,
And recognizing that can be both frustrating and liberating.
it can. It can.
Yeah. It allows us to advocate for change,
It does.
to challenge systems that perpetuate inequality,
Yeah,
and to support others who are facing those barriers.
right. And to redefine
It's
success
inscriptive.
on our own terms.
On your own terms.
Recognizing that our worth isn't solely tied to those achievements.
Exactly, which is so important.
It is.
Okay, one more truth before we give our listeners a break to process all this.
All right.
What about number 7? People change, relationships end. This one ties into both the other people and the individual, right?
It does. It's about acknowledging that both we and the people around us
Yes.
are constantly evolving,
Yeah, yeah.
and sometimes those paths diverge,
Yeah.
and that can be incredibly painful.
You can't force someone to stay the same.
Hmm.
And you can't force yourself to stay the same either.
You can't. Sometimes it's healthier to let go
Let go.
and allow each person to grow in their own direction.
Exactly. The source encourages us to cherish the memories
Yeah,
while also accepting that letting go
right.
is sometimes necessary for both parties to move forward.
It is.
It's like honoring the season that relationship served in your life,
Oh, I like that.
but not trying to force it to bloom year-round.
I love that analogy.
Beautifully said. I think that's a perfect place to pause for part 1 of this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's still so much more to explore.
We've just scratched the surface.
Scratch the surface.
We'll be back in part 2 to delve deeper into the remaining hard truths
Yes.
and how they can help us navigate the complexities of life.
So until then, listeners, take some time to reflect on what we've discussed today. Which truth resonates most strongly with you right now?
Yeah.
And how do those conceptual characters play out in your own life story? We'll be back soon to continue the conversation.
We will. I'm excited.
Me too.
Looking forward to it.
Welcome back to our deep dive into life's hard truths. In part 1, we explored the timeline of life's lessons and the intriguing cast of characters that you sent our way. Now we're going to tackle even more of those thought-provoking hard truths, connecting them back to those frameworks.
I'm looking forward to it. We've got some pretty insightful ones to unpack, and I'm curious to see how they resonate with you, the listener.
Me too. Okay, let's dive in. Well, what really caught my eye was Your happiness is your responsibility. It sounds empowering at first, but it can also feel a bit daunting, don't you think? Like, what if you're going through a tough time? Are you supposed to just force yourself to be happy?
That's a great question, and it highlights the potential for, like, misunderstanding this truth. It's not about denying negative emotions or, like, slapping on a fake smile when things are hard. It's more about recognizing that we have agency in how we respond to life's challenges. We can choose to wallow in negativity, or we can actively cultivate joy through our mindset, habits, and the boundaries we set.
So it's not about toxic positivity, but about taking ownership of our emotional well-being.
Exactly. And that looks different for everyone. For some, it might mean practicing gratitude daily. For others, it might mean prioritizing self-care or setting boundaries in toxic relationships. It could even mean seeking professional help to address mental health challenges. The key is to be proactive rather than passive in our pursuit of happiness.
It's like instead of waiting for happiness to magically appear, you're creating the conditions for it to flourish. That makes a lot more sense. And it ties back to that idea of the individual being responsible for their own journey.
It does. It's about recognizing that while external factors certainly impact our happiness, we also have an internal role to play. And that's empowering, because it means we're not just victims of circumstance. We have choices.
That's a great point. Okay, let's move on to truth number 13. Health is your greatest asset. I feel like this one becomes even more resonant as we get older, but it's something we often take for granted when we're younger.
Absolutely. When you're young, you feel invincible, right? You can pull all-nighters, eat junk food, and bounce back from anything. But the source reminds us that those choices have consequences down the line.
It's like you're slowly accumulating debt, but instead of financial debt, it's health debt, and eventually that debt comes due. Not to be a total downer, but, it's true.
It is true. But the good news is that we have a lot of control over our well-being. It's about making conscious choices that support our long-term health and happiness. Think about it in terms of, like, investing in yourself.
Okay, I like that analogy. So it's not about being perfect or following some crazy restrictive diet. It's about making sustainable changes that actually make you feel good. Things like getting enough sleep, eating nutritious foods, moving your body, managing stress.
Exactly. It's about finding what works for you and making those choices a consistent part of your life.
And it connects back to self-care, which we talked about in part 1. Prioritizing your health isn't selfish. It's essential for showing up as your best self in all areas of life.
Absolutely. Okay, let's tackle another truth. How about number 12? Dreams require compromise. This one can be a bit of a heartbreaker, especially if you've been holding on to certain aspirations for a long time.
Yeah, it's like that moment you realize your childhood dream of becoming a rock star might not actually pan out. I mean, I can still tread on the air guitar, but...
We all have those dreams that might need some adjusting as we go through life, right? But the source isn't saying to give up on our dreams entirely. It's about being flexible, adaptable, and open to new possibilities.
So instead of clinging rigidly to a specific outcome, you're embracing the journey and adjusting your course as needed.
Exactly. And the source emphasizes that this can actually lead to, like, greater resilience and gratitude. When we're able to celebrate those smaller wins along the way, we're less likely to feel disappointed if things do go exactly according to plan.
It's like maybe your dream job didn't work out, but it led you to a different opportunity that you ended up loving even more. Or maybe your relationship goals shifted, but you learned something valuable about yourself in the process.
Right. And sometimes those unexpected detours lead us to something even better than we could have imagined. I think this truth also connects back to systemic barriers. Sometimes external forces can make it really tough to achieve certain dreams, no matter how hard you work.
So it's about being realistic, but not giving up hope.
Exactly. It's about finding ways to adapt, to find new avenues for your passions, and to support others who are facing similar challenges.
Okay, let's switch gears for a moment and talk about one of the heavier truths. Number 10, loss is inevitable. This one can feel almost too big to process sometimes.
It is a universal experience that touches everyone at some point, and it could be incredibly difficult to grapple with. But the source reminds us that grief is the price of love. We wouldn't experience such profound loss if we hadn't loved deeply in the first place.
And that's where the lost loved one's character comes in, right? It's not just about the absence, but also about the legacy they leave behind, the memories we cherish, the lessons they taught us. It's about how they continue to shape us even after they're gone.
Exactly. And the source encourages us to honor those loved ones by living fully, cherishing our present connections, and recognizing that even in death, love continues to shape who we are.
It's like they become woven into the fabric of our being. Okay, I want to talk about one more truth before we move on to part three. And it's one that feels particularly relevant in today's world. Number 15, self-awareness is painful but powerful. Why do you think this one is so important?
I think it's because self-awareness is the foundation for like so much personal growth. It's about being willing to confront your flaws, your blind spots, even those parts of yourself that you might not be proud of. And that can be uncomfortable, even painful.
Yeah, nobody really enjoys looking in the mirror and seeing their imperfections, right? But the source suggests that this kind of radical self-honesty is actually essential for building healthier relationships and living a more authentic life.
Absolutely. And it's not about beating yourself up or dwelling in shame. It's about approaching your imperfections with curiosity and compassion, recognizing that uh, we're all works in progress.
And I think that ties back to the idea of the individual character being on this lifelong journey of learning and growth. It's about recognizing that we're never going to reach some like perfect finished state. It's all about the process of becoming.
Beautifully said. And that process requires both self-awareness and the willingness to embrace discomfort, challenge our assumptions, and be open to new perspectives.
It's like that quote, "The unexamined life is not worth living." We have to be willing to dig deep and confront the truth about ourselves, even when it's tough.
I love that quote. Okay, I think it's time to wrap up part 2 of this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, exploring some truly profound truths about life, love, loss, and the importance of self-awareness.
You know, it's amazing how these seemingly simple truths can spark such profound conversations. But before we jump to part three, where we'll tackle the final and perhaps most hopeful truth, I'd love to hear from you, the listener. Which truth has resonated most strongly with you so far?
Yes, and how do these truths connect to your own life experiences? We'll be back soon for the final part of this deep dive.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive. We've explored the timeline, the characters, and so many of those thought-provoking hard truths. You ready to tackle the final one?
I am.
Okay, drum roll, please. It's truth number one. Failure is inevitable. I know this doesn't exactly sound like a cheerful note to end on, but you mentioned this is the most hopeful truth of all.
It is.
So tell me why you think that.
Well, I think it's hopeful because, like, it takes the pressure off.
Okay.
If failure is inevitable, then it's not a reflection of our worth or our abilities, right?
Right.
It's simply a part of the process.
Part of the process, yeah.
It happens to everyone. Even the most successful people in the world have experienced tons of setbacks along the way.
So it's not about avoiding failure, but about how we view it. It's almost like giving yourself permission to fail.
Exactly. The source emphasizes that failure is a necessary step towards growth and resilience.
Okay.
It's through our mistakes that we learn, adapt, and become stronger. Think about it, like when you were learning to ride a bike, you probably fell a few times, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But each fall, it taught you something, helped you adjust, and eventually you were riding with confidence.
I love that analogy. I can picture myself like with the little training wheels wobbling all over the place. It makes you wonder how many amazing things we'd miss out on if we were just too afraid to fail.
That's such a good point. The fear of failure can be so paralyzing, right?
Yeah.
It can keep us from taking risks, trying new things, and reaching our full potential.
All right.
But this truth encourages us to embrace those stumbles and see them as opportunities for growth.
I love that. So it's like instead of seeing failure as a dead end, we're viewing it as a detour, maybe even a shortcut to something even better.
A shortcut. I like that. Right. And this connects back to the individual character, that part of ourselves that's on this lifelong journey of learning and evolving. Failure is just a part of that.
You know, it makes me think about all those like successful entrepreneurs we hear about. Their stories are always filled with setbacks and challenges, but they kept going. They learned from those experiences and they ultimately achieved their goals. So inspiring.
It is. It's so inspiring. And it highlights the importance of persistence.
Right.
Failure isn't a reason to give up.
It's a reason to try again.
Exactly. It's a reason to try again, but this time with more knowledge and experience.
So how do we apply this truth in a practical way? I mean, it's one thing to say failure's okay, but it's another to actually like feel that way when it happens.
Right. It's hard. That's where self-compassion comes in. When we fail, we need to treat ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a close friend. Instead of beating ourselves up, we can ask, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this setback?
It's about shifting from self-criticism to self-reflection.
Yeah,
Instead of saying, I'm such a failure, we can ask, what can I do differently next time?
exactly. And that ties back to the idea of self-awareness, being able to look at our mistakes objectively without letting them define us.
I'm also thinking about the other people character. We're not alone in this. Everyone experiences failure. And seeking support from others can be incredibly helpful when you're going through those tough times.
Absolutely. Talking to someone we trust, someone who can offer a listening ear and a different perspective, it can help us gain clarity and find a path forward.
And sometimes failure can even lead to unexpected opportunities or connections. Maybe a business venture doesn't work out, but it leads you to meet your future business partner. Or maybe a relationship ends, but it creates space for a more fulfilling one to enter your life.
It's all about perspective, recognizing that even in those moments that feel like the end of the world, there's potential for growth, learning, and new beginnings.
I love how this final truth, it just ties everything together. It reminds us that the journey is just as important as the destination, and that even the bumps in the road can lead to unexpected treasures.
Beautifully said. This deep dive has been quite a journey, exploring the complexities of life through the lens of these hard truths. I hope you found it insightful.
Me too, and I think we've covered a lot of ground, but this is really just the beginning. These truths are meant to be pondered, reflected upon, and integrated into our lives in a way that feels authentic.
Well said. So as we wrap up, I'd like to leave you with a final thought. If you could go back and tell your younger self one of these hard truths, which would it be and why?
Ooh, that is such a great question to reflect on. Which truth would you choose, and how might sharing that wisdom with your younger self have changed your journey? It's something to ponder as you continue your own unique and ever-evolving life journey. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep embracing those hard truths. They might just lead you to a more fulfilling and meaningful life. Tammy 9.